Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me. This week we studied a portion of Noah. So before I begin and share with you what I discovered this year in relations to our current situation, I came across the following, and I thought it would be fun to share with everybody. And what I came across is everything I need to know about life I learned from Noah's Ark. This week we read about Noah building an ark. And everything you need to know, just read the story of Noah. Here are lessons you can learn from Noah. Number one, don't miss the boat. Number two, remember that we are all on the same boat. Number three, plan ahead. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. Number four, stay fit. When you're 600 years old, someone may ask you to do something really big. Number five, don't listen to critics. Just get on with the job that needs to be done. Number six, build your future on high grounds. Number seven, for safety's sake, travel in pairs. Number eight, remember, the Ark was built by amateurs, but the Titanic by professionals. And number 10, no matter what the storm, when you are with God, there is always a rainbow waiting. And these are the lessons that Noah can teach us. I just want to share with you, as I share with my children, every year I look forward to study the Torah anew, because I find, based on my current conditions and situation, I find different gems in the Torah. And these are gems that I have never discovered before, because I've never faced certain challenges or lived a certain lifestyle at the time prior. This year, we all are faced with the pandemic of Corona, and it means that those who have been to synagogue on Shabbat, I spoke about the high rate of depression, of melancholy, of suicidal thoughts. People are really walking around depressed. People are wondering what tomorrow will bring. People are sometimes so depressed that they are, so to say, giving up on life. And I came across the story of Noah, and I figured this is something I can see in Noah's life. If you read the story of Noah as described in this week's portion, you find that Noah was very depressed, a pessimist, someone who did not see a brighter future, someone who always figured it can always get worse. As somebody would say, don't worry, tomorrow can get worse. So Noah, that's why that explains some parts to the story of Noah, which otherwise are kind of peculiar. And I want to run by you some points that point out that Noah was not a happy man. He wasn't a happy camper at all. On page 53, sorry, on page 53 in the Chumash, and chapter 8, verse 15, we read that after the land is all dried out, after the flood, God spoke to Noah saying, go out of the ark, you, your wife, your sons' wives with you, and take out all the animals. The sages are wondering why Noah needed a commandment to go out of the ark. Shouldn't he find the first opportunity? Why was it a question whether he should walk outside? And our sages tell us that Noah was so depressed because he was used to his local publics. He was used to walking into the bank and withdrawing money from the ATM. He was looking to schmoozing together after morning service. He was looking to going out to the theater and expecting Amazon delivery every day and a half. And now suddenly nothing of that sort exists anymore. There are no more stores, there are no more shops, there are no more banks, there are no more friends. He refused to get out of the ark. He was sitting by himself, mourning the destruction of the universe and refusing to go out. Only when God commanded him and said to him, "You must leave the ark," that's when he did. That explains another story. If you open up on page 57, chapter 9, verse 20, we read that after Noah came out of the ark, I'm reading in English, Noah, a master of the soil, degraded, degraded himself by planting a vineyard. He drank of the wine, became drunk, and embarrassed himself. He uncovered himself. Again, our sages tell us that the only thing he can think of was getting drunk. The first thing a man does should be to build a house, to create a safety net, to have more children to populate the universe. Yet the first thing we find the Torah tells us he did was planting a vine and growing grapes, so he becoming intoxicated. We all know that people who are depressed, they are looking for ways to let go of those feelings by drinking a little bit. And that's what happened to him. In addition, we read that Noah wasn't a great believer. He was so depressed with with his generation, and that's why he needed to be pushed by God to enter the ark. That's already a little more to the Midrash, but it's the same point. The Midrash tells us that Noah, as long as the flood began, Noah was not in the Teva, in the ark, until it got so flooded that he realized it's about time, otherwise he wouldn't be around. Noah wasn't sure. He did not trust. He didn't think there is any future to humanity. He wasn't sure if he should do it or not. He was kind of wondering in his mind. His mind wasn't so clear about what to do. This is the story of Noah in this week's portion. And I've discovered that this year, because it is so appropriate to where people are, so to say, wondering, isn't that the great flood? And even if I stay home in the ark, by the time I come out, I lose friends, business, socializing is going to be different. It's a whole new universe. There's no doubt that we are going to have different type relationship. I'm not sure when and how we will be able to congregate together for a Super Bowl game or for a movie theater or for a large wedding and large gathering. We're not sure if it's ever going to happen, and if it does, definitely it's not going to be the same. I read somewhere that the shaking of hands is gone. There will be no more shaking of hands now. In other words, in 25 years, 30 years, our children will hear or see movies where we shake hands in the movies, and they'll poke fun of us for doing that because we don't do that anymore. Life is different, and some people refuse to get out of the ark when the time is to go out. We need to know that it's not for us to wait for God to command us, but the first opportunity. The reason I share with you, I'm sure you realize I'm a chassid, I'm an upbeat man, I try and I fight for energy and joy, is because the end of the portion, the description of a new man that came to the universe, he is the exact opposite, the polar opposite, 180 degrees. His name is Abraham. Abraham not only is a very happy and upbeat human being, but he has a great trust in humanity. That's why he's trying to change and convert everybody to believe in God. Imagine the entire universe is worshiping idols, and a man comes and says, all that you do is you waste of time. It's time for you to believe in only a single God. And this is just this is akin to people driving cars, and somebody comes and introduces horse and buggies and says that's a better way to transport and to move from one place to the other. This is what Abraham does at the end of this expulsion. Towards the end, if you go into the towards the end of this expulsion, you find on page 64. These are the I'm reading on page 64, chapter 11, verse 27. These are the offsprings of Terach. Terach fathered Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Haran fathered Lot. Haran died during the lifetime of his father Terach. And then Abraham and Nahor took themselves wives. And Terach took Abraham and his son and Lot, the son of Haran, and he takes them away from his homeland. Why did he take him away? Because the king, or at the time, tried to kill Abraham for refusing to stop spreading monotheism. He continuously defied the king and continuously explained people that there is only one God, and that God is a good God. They have nothing to fear, and they don't have to bribe anybody, and they don't have to cry. And for that, the king wanted to kill him, tried to kill him, threw him into a fire furnace. And Abraham refused to change, as we're going to read next week, when God himself tells him he's about to destroy the town of Sodom and 4 other cities. Abraham argues with God. And the reason is, unlike Noah, Abraham saw the potential in humanity. He saw that the future of human beings are good. They fail, they sometimes misbehave, but it doesn't mean that they're bad. And therefore, even Sodom and Gomorrah people deserve a second chance. Noah, when he was told about his generation, he gave up. He didn't even try. He didn't even talk to the people trying to convince them to change their behavior, let alone convincing God to change his mind. And that's the difference between a Jew. And I think that you need to have it ingrained in your brains and life. A Jew is never depressed. A Jew is always proud of life, of God, because God is around us. There are times where we are challenged. There are times that are very painful. And there are times that we need to change lifestyle that we are accustomed to, but never at any point it causes us to be depressed. So this is my story in general about Noah. Now I want to get to a few more points. We're going to go back to the beginning, the start of the portion. Chapter 6, verse 9, page 39 in the Chumash. These are the offsprings of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. He was perfectly righteous in his generation. Noah walked with God. So the first question is, the Torah tells us these are the offsprings of Noah, and immediately the Torah described that Noah was a righteous man, a perfectly walking in front of God. And only after that, the Torah described his children. And our sages teach us, and this is very important, that actually good deeds of a person are his and her offsprings. And by the way, we see it with Moshe. By Moshe, we have a similar situation. By Jacob, we have a similar situation, that the Torah is about to describe their offsprings, and immediately the Torah goes to describe about their behavior. So the offsprings of Noah are his good behavior and righteousness. But the way the Torah describes his good deeds is very peculiar, and it created an argument in the Talmud, and I want to get down to that argument. The Torah tells us that Noah is a righteous man, a perfect man in his generations. Bedorotav. Dor is generation. Dorotav is plural. The Talmud is asking, what do you mean in his generations? It's not enough to say he was a righteous man, perfect man walking before God. Why does the Torah say he was a righteous and perfect man in his generation? Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, it's important to know the names because I'm going to go and share with you their lifestyle so that you understand where they both are coming from. Rabbi Yochanan said, the Torah tells us that he was a righteous and perfect human being in his generation when there was no one good behaving. But if you put Noah in Abraham's generation or in Moshe's time, he wouldn't be extraordinary. He would be an ordinary good man. He wouldn't be righteous. He wouldn't be described as perfect. The only reason the Torah describes him as a righteous and perfect man is because in his generation, he was kind of a match in the darkness that lights up the room. Take the match out in front of the sun, and you have no value. The match, you don't even know if the match is lit or not. That's Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish, Rabbi Shimon. Reish is an acronym, by the way. It's a name of a letter. Reish is a name of a letter, but it's referred to Reish Lakish, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, who was a buddy of Rabbi Yochanan. In a moment, I'll show you more details. He says, no, quite the opposite. In his generation, he was righteous. If you put him in a different generation, he would be even more righteous, much greater than in his time, because the challenge that he faced with his surrounding, the neighborhood, the community, the association, the town, the country, was so corrupt, and yet he remained steadfast in following what God commanded. How much more so if he had other people to socialize who are good? He would be even greater and closer to God than he was. So one, Rabbi Yochanan explained that Noah, the Torah says in his generation, to tell us that he wasn't that great. The Torah, so to say, minimizes his greatness, that his greatness was only then because of the people around him. Reish Lakish actually expand. Dorotav, in his generation, he was righteous, but if you put him in other generations that are not so corrupt, he would be even greater. So the Torah described how great he was, extraordinary human being. The following is based on the Lubavitch Rebbe's ideas. The Rebbe said that sometimes if you want to know the Torah, the Talmud describe an argument between two rabbis, if you go and find out more about those men, it tells you a lot about the argument and how it can apply to us. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish are two distinct individuals who are very, very close, but their upbringing was totally different. I'm going to show it to you Rabbi Yochanan's upbringing, and then we'll see why was he critical of Noah. Rabbi Yochanan was born to very holy parents, and they both died when he was born. However, they inherited him a nice estate in Tiberias. When he grew up, when he became a teenager, he decided to study Torah, so he didn't want to farm. Most those days, farming was vast majority of people who did any business dealing. So he went and sold his property and all his assets, and with the money, he went and paid tuition to study Torah. So his entire life, he was connected with the study of Torah. Later on, he became a very holy man and the leader of the Jewish people. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, Rabbi Judah, the president, the prince, who composed the Mishnah, was his master. And when he was even young, Rabbi Yochanan was young, Rabbi Yehuda said great praise about this man. So Rabbi Yochanan was, so to say, a righteous man, very, very well sheltered from the outside, a man that was always engrossed in diving into the sea of study and serving God. You can imagine when he sees someone less than perfect, he can be critical because the way where he comes from, this is insufficient, because what he experiences much closeness to God and much greater devotion. Reish Lakish, on the other hand, at a young age, he studied with Rabbi Yochanan in Cheder, in elementary school. Later on, for whatever reason, he became a bandit. He became a mobster. And he would rob and embezzle. And he was known as one of the, um, he was a no-goodnik. Let's call him a no-goodnik. Everybody knew if they need a job done, they would come to him with a few shekels. He will eliminate some lives. He would get you permits from the county. He will make sure people open their mouth. He was no goodnik. One day he was swimming in the Jordan River, and Rabbi Yochanan saw that Resh Lakish is swimming against the current. So Rabbi Yochanan says to him, you know, you strength. Rabbi Yochanan saw him, he didn't even recognize him because he wasn't the same as he was younger. He says to him, young man, your strength is so good. With that, you can crack the study of Torah much deeper than most people. And Reish Lakish turned to him and he says, you know, your beauty, Rabbi Yochanan is known to be one of the very few beautiful people. We have Eve, Sarah, Jacob, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, the Talmud tells us, you put a rose next to the face of Rabbi Yochanan, and his face shine more beautiful than the beauty of the rose. So so Reish Lakish says to him, you know, with your beauty, you can attract and get any girl you want to go home with you. So Rabbi Yochanan says to him, I have a sister. If you go back to study Torah with me, I'll convince my sister to marry you. And Reish Lakish agreed. Whatever, I showed the story in detail. That's a Talmudic story. He went back into the study hall and he married actually Rabbi Yochanan's sister. They became brother-in-laws. And then Reish Lakish would argue with Rabbi Yochanan. He became one of the greatest masters at the time. In his time, as a partner, the closest to Rabbi Yochanan, who was the leader of the community, the entire Jewish people. Reish Lakish came from a place of when it misbehaved, when he faced challenges and not always was able to overcome them. Now we can understand that he is praising Noah because he knew those challenges, he knew that lifestyle. And he says to himself, if Noah faced such great challenges and still remained connected to God, in his generation he was so great. How much more so if you put him in our time next to Rabbi Yochanan, next to Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, next to Rabban Gamliel, next to Hillel and Shammai, he would have a company, good company would have been much, much greater. The Rebbe, the reason I share that with you is because the Rebbe points out that today we are dealing with appointing a Supreme Judge, right? We're looking for another judge in the Supreme Court. We're not going to talk politics, but judging, being a judge, is an issue that we all are faced with. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both are passing judgment about Noah. One is critical of Noah, saying the extra word, bedorotav, in his generation, is to criticize him. The other is actually to praise him, that in his generation, how much more so, how greater would have been. Sometimes we need to understand that when we pass judgment, we actually reveal about ourselves more than the person we are judging. And that's the point of the Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So many times, if I look at somebody and I would say, oh, it came to him very easy, no big deal. Or why is he doing it? Or why is he speaking about it? We can think that he's worked so hard for it. It came to him. His parents gave it to him. It happened to him by nature. What we actually do, we are not talking about the other person, but we reveal about who are we. What kind of a person are we? We are revealing through the judging of others. Judging people, and it appears in many places, actually is a mirror by which you reflect yourself, not just for yourself, but also for your surrounding. And that's why there was one more point about the story of Noah. I forgot. Okay, So this is the point of Noah. One final, so that's why you have the two opinions about Noah, whether he was righteous in his generation, which is a plus, or being a righteous. Oh, the point I wanted to make is many times people come to synagogue and they come only once a month, maybe once a year, or they make a contribution and some people might think, oh, they don't make a large contribution. Why are they making so much noise, fanfare for the little $18 or $25 contribution they make? I say, please remember that you have to look at the generation, at the neighborhood, at their background, at their family. Some people come from a place where no one ever gave tzedakah. Some people come from a community, meaning from a family where they never attend synagogue. So the little they do might be much more valued than someone else who's attending synagogue every day. Someone who reads Hebrew and understands Hebrew may connect with prayer. It's easier for him to study. Someone who's doing it out of the ordinary because he lives in a time, meaning his friends, his associates, his spouse, his children, parents, his neighborhood are not brought up that way. For them, you have to be able to say, in his generation he's righteous. How much more so if he was like me, brought up with the tradition, having such a great supportive wife or husband, having a family, having a father and mother like I did, having been master the language. How much greater would we be? He would have been most likely a much closer to God and way farther ahead than ours. So before you judge others, just think about the story of Noach, Rabbi Yochanan, and Rish Lakish. And I think we're running out of time, so I'd like to conclude right now. Thank you very much for being good students. And I'm going to unmute you. So if you have any questions or if you have any comment.